Okay, hello class and welcome to chapter 2. In today's lecture, we're going to be discussing personality and how that impacts us in terms of being good leaders. Matter of fact, a key part of leading, as we talked about previously, is understanding that what makes people effective leaders is their ability to influence other individuals, their ability to persuade them to buy into their vision, to persuade them to follow their instructions. This is all a very important part of being a leader. It all ties back to your interaction with humans and people. Understanding that within your own local culture and being a successful leader is challenging. When we overlay um, global concerns or in multiple cultures, then it becomes even more complex. But the fundamentals underneath a person's personality all remain the same, regardless of what culture we're from. Okay, there may be certain cultural nuances in terms of how we express these basic personality traits, but the personality traits themselves are pretty much the same. In this slide presentation here, we're going to talk about personality. We're going to go over 2 different personality models, which are very important and provide a lot of insight when it comes to dealing with and interacting with people. Okay, so let's get started. We're going to start with the Big 5 personality model. Now, this is arguably the most popular personality model used by academics. And you'll hear this throughout all the academic literature. It's been researched significantly. There's a lot of studies that prove the validity of these personality traits and how these traits correspond to behaviors that people may engage in, how it may correspond to the actions that people may take, how it manifests itself in the workplace. So let's get right to it. The Big 5 personality traits refers to 5 dominant personality traits that every individual has. Now, we all have different amounts, or we're on different extremes of these various personality traits, which makes every person unique. Every person's personality is uniquely different, much like our fingerprints are all similar, but they're different. Our personalities are much the same way. The traits that comprise this model are extroversion, agreeableness, openness, that's openness to new experiences, conscientiousness, and neuroticism. So these are the 5 traits. Now when we talk about them and we name them, we're really naming one side of the continuum, because each of these traits, you can either be strongly an extrovert or you can be an introvert. Okay, so they're all a scale, and you'll see that in the next slide. So it's a continuum, and we can be at any point along that continuum on any of these 5 traits. Now, a lot of times people think, well, my personality is a lot different now than it was when I was younger, or my personality has changed a great deal because I went through this life experience. So here's the thing: personality traits rarely change. But what does happen is how you may choose to express things, your behaviors, your habits, those things can change over time. You can learn new habits and learn new behaviors, but your personality is essentially what your personality is established pretty early in life. I want to say like between the ages of 3 and 5, the dominant components of your personality are well established and they follow you through the rest of your life. So, if you're a person that's an introvert or you're highly agreeable, that's pretty much what you're going to be even as you get older. Okay. Your personality, they're influenced significantly by genes, okay, and the environment that you grow up in, particularly during those formative years. Okay. So if you're a person that's kind of told to always be quiet and you're punished for speaking up in those formative years, that could get encoded on your personality. And then you're that way pretty much for the rest of your life. So here you are now, even at the age of 45 or 50, and you still don't speak up for yourself. And that's because your personality has been kind of implanted with that. But we all know people who were friends with in high school that maybe they were a little wild, a little crazy, and you meet them later on in life again, and they're still a little wild, a little crazy. Now, maybe they calmed down a bit because of age, but the desire to seek that excitement, that enthusiasm still exists within them. So Personality traits are also known to predict certain important life outcomes, such as education and health. We can look at your personality and tell this person's probably going to be successful, meaning that that personality is going to enable them to successfully navigate through the American lifestyle or the things that are expected of people in America. And we could be pretty accurate with that. So, for example, I have a niece, and she is highly responsible. She's very conscientious. She's she'll wake up in the morning, she'll fix breakfast for her family. Even if she's not told to, she does that. She wants to make sure the breakfast is done by 7:30, because then she's going to start studying, doing her homework, for her online schooling, because it's during the time period right now we have COVID. So, so she's very responsible, and she operates on a clock, and she's like that right now in high school. So she's going to carry the same traits into college. And those same traits will aid her in terms of her studying for her college degree and her graduate degree. And they'll aid her in terms of being, a good employee. Will it make her a great leader? Not necessarily. But will it make her a great employee? Yes. Will it cause her to have success in her career? Very likely. So we can look at that personality trait and we can make those types of predictions. It doesn't guarantee it. Obviously, there's all kinds of things that could happen in somebody's life. But what we're talking about is generalization. We're talking about correlations. So here is a model of the big 5 personality traits. And we have all of them here: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. These are the 5 traits. And as I noted before, it's a continuum. So you could have someone who's closed, who's not open to new experiences. And then on the other end, you have someone who's open to new experiences. Okay, so it's very important to understand the fact that this is a continuum. Conscientiousness. You could have a person who's very conscientious or a person who's very spontaneous. It's a continuum. And we'll talk about each of these traits in greater detail and what they mean to kind of operate at the extremes of both levels. Now, is there anyone who's ever truly an absolute extreme? Probably not, right? But there are people that are certainly more open and more closed. So unlike other trait theories that kind of put individuals into binary categories, such as being, introvert or you're an extrovert, you're one or the other, the big 5 personality doesn't believe in binary categories. It doesn't believe in either one or two. It believes in a continuum. Okay. So the number of personality traits that it can exist is infinite, because we all have these attributes. It's just how much of these traits do we all have? And that makes for an infinite number of combinations of personality traits. All right, so let's talk about the first one, right? Conscientiousness. And you're going to see this image here kind of follow the next couple slides, because you can look at each trait and you can see kind of what if a person were low on conscientiousness, what they would be like. If they're high on conscientiousness, what they would be like. So conscientiousness refers to how disciplined a person is, how aware they are of their environment, how organized they tend to be. So a highly conscientious person is very disciplined. They're very thoughtful. Okay, they're very competent. They're always paying attention to what's going on. They're alert. They're hardworking. They're dependable. Then we have people who are on the opposite, who are low on conscientiousness. And these people are fairly impulsive. They're careless. They're disorganized. They don't, have a lot of structure. They don't like a lot of structure. Okay. So if you ever walk into a person's office and their office is a complete mess, it's just disheveled. It's a big mess. Now, I'm not going to say because their office is a mess, it means they're not conscientious. The real question to ask yourself is it an organized mess? If they need to find something, can they go right to it and find it? So sometimes people have things, disorganized and disheveled because they're so busy, they don't take the time to put things back up. They don't take the time to put things back in their proper place. But yet they remember where they put things at. So they can quickly find things, even though their office to the average person looks disheveled. So you have to ask a further question. And that question is it organized? Is it an organized mess, or is it a disorganized mess? Okay. Conscientious people don't just rush out and pursue something. They want to do the research on it first. They want to understand, is it accurate? Is it correct? Okay. before they just jump out. They're not very impulsive. When it comes to the job, highly conscientious people tend to make the best workers because these people are consistently high performers. They're the ones that are constantly getting the ratings of 1 and 2, on the 5-point grading scale. All right. However, they're not the best managers. And if you take a step back, you can kind of understand why they may not make the best managers, because they're highly conscientious, and individuals like that tend to expect the same conscientious behavior out of everyone else that they're working with. And we know that that's just simply not the case. At its core, it's an unrealistic expectation. So, and oftentimes that expectation can cause a significant amount of frustration among workers, because the boss may have been very organized and had it together and knew exactly what to do, but the worker may be less conscientious. Therefore, it takes them a little bit longer to get the job done, or a little bit longer to find the information than the boss. And that can create a lot of frustration in the boss, saying stuff like, why aren't you better organized? This shouldn't take this long. And for the boss, it didn't take that long because their personality is geared a certain way. But for the workers, it's a little bit different. So having a person that's consistently a high performer and who demands that high level of performance from all their workers does not make for a good work environment. Okay, so I'm not saying that they can't. Obviously, any personality here can be a successful leader, but I'm saying according to personality types, certain personalities lend themselves to being natural leaders, whereas others lend themselves to requiring more work and skill acquisition to become a good leader. Let's talk about agreeableness. So agreeableness, and that's right here, second to the bottom. Agreeableness, this refers to how cooperative a person is, okay? How trustworthy and good natured a person is. A person who is highly agreeable tends to agree with whatever is going on taking place. For example, you may have a friend who says, let's go out to dinner. And the agreeable person says, yeah, let's do it. Well, I think I want to go for Chinese food. That sounds good to me. I have no problem with that. You know what? I changed my mind. I want to go out for Italian food. Sure, I love the Olive Garden. Why don't we go check that place out? The agreeable person is not a person who seeks conflict. It's just their personality. It doesn't make them weak or spineless. I think we need to dispel that myth, because obviously they can have their own opinions and everything. It's just that they value being agreeable and going with the flow. It's just part of their personality. Okay. If they don't like something, they're certainly capable of speaking up. But if it's something that they really don't mind, then they don't mind going with the flow. Okay. So people who are agreeable, who are high on agreeableness, they are very trustworthy, they're very cooperative, they tend to trust other people, they're helpful, they're empathic, which means that they understand the emotions of other people, and they try to work in a way that creates the least amount of emotional friction. Okay. People who are low on this trait are very critical. They're suspicious. They're uncooperative. They're not trusting. Okay. There's a saying that says, I'm from Wisconsin, the show me state. So I'm not going to believe what you say. You got to show me and prove it to me. That would be an example of unagreeableness. Another example would be if you have a friend or know someone that's always contrary. They always take the opposite position of no matter whatever you say, they take the opposite position. I was once in a relationship with a young lady that was like that. And I promise you, I could say, man, sure is a nice day outside. The sun is shining brightly. And she would find a way to take the opposite position no matter what I said. Yeah, but it was brighter yesterday. Or it's not as bright as it is because there's some clouds that are coming in. So it may be bright right now, but it's not going to be bright for long. She would have something to say at all times. Talk about a very frustrating position. Needs to say that relationship did not last very long. So when it comes to the job, people that are high on agreeableness, this tends to be the employee that's liked by everybody. Everybody likes Bill. Bill's just a great guy. And the reason why everybody likes Bill is because Bill is high on agreeableness. If you kind of take a basic look at psychology, we tend to like the people that like us. We tend to like people that remind us of ourselves. And a person that's high on agreeableness, they always agree with what you want. They agree with how you feel. They agree with what you want to go do. Therefore, implicitly, people take that as this person is similar to me, which engenders feelings of liking someone. Okay, so the person that's most liked by everybody on the job is most likely somebody that's high in agreeableness. Okay, they tend to be friends with everyone. Neuroticism. So you'll find at the bottom of the image here, neuroticism. This refers to a person's tendency to be unstable in their emotions. Okay, so they frequently change. They experience feelings and emotions more intensely than other people. Right? So when it comes to things like feeling anxious or unhappy, they feel those emotions and they feel them more intensely than others. Right? It's important for us to note this. Some people, we all have emotions. We all experience anger, fear, happiness, joy. We all experience these feelings, but there are some people who experience them in a much more powerful way. So, let's say you're experiencing joy. You may be experiencing it at a level 5, which is pretty normal for people. But then there's another person that when they have that same feeling of joy, they experience it at a level 7 or 8 or 9, right? So their tendency to feel emotions is greater. Um, and I remember, this reminds me of a child that I have. He's not neurotic by any means, but when he was a baby, one of my boys, he just cried for everything. I mean, it felt like just because he was breathing, he would start crying, right? He'd hear a loud noise, he'd start to cry. He got one, his diaper just a little bit wet, he starts to cry. Okay, so he was just more sensitive to things. Whereas my first child, he was not. He could sit there in a wet diaper all day and you would never know because he would never cry or do anything. Some people are just simply put more sensitive than others. And even till today, he's more emotionally sensitive than my oldest child. Okay, so let's get to it. When we're talking about neuroticism, these are individuals specifically that tend to feel negative emotions much more intensely. So all those things that, anxiety, unhappiness, you see these, very extreme mood fluctuations. So one minute they're happy and they're good and they're fine. The next minute they're crying, they're depressed, they're angry. The next minute, they're angry, they're anxious, and they're constantly fluctuating from emotion to emotion. It's very difficult for them to control how they behave while experiencing these emotions. You may have a friend that demonstrates some neurotic tendencies. Okay, you may go to a club and they're having a good time. All of a sudden, somebody steps on their foot, and now they're ready to fight. They went from 0 to 100. They went from dancing and having a good time to now they're ready to fight. And how dare that person offend me? And they're all worked up. Okay, so that's an example, or an example of a person that's maybe a bit neurotic. Now, the opposite of neurotic is a person that's very calm, very even tempered. As I said before, we all experience emotions, some of us more intense than others, and some of us less intense. Do you ever have a friend that you look at that person, man, do they ever get upset? Do they ever experience any emotion? What's wrong with you? Not that something is necessarily wrong with them. I'm just trying to be extreme here, but I just don't get a reaction. This would have got a reaction out of the average person, but from you, I'm not getting a reaction. You're very steady. It's like they're always the same today, tomorrow, yesterday. They're the same. And even when there is an emotional fluctuation, it's very tempered. Okay, so you begin to realize that, oh, this is what it looks like for them to be extremely happy, or this is what it looks like for them to be extremely sad. And you have to change your definition of what you would look at for the normal person, because this person is very calm. They're the opposite of neurotic. Okay, so it reminds me of, I know someone who is very much this way, right? And even when someone that he liked came and said, hey, I'd like to marry your daughter. I want to get your permission to do so. Obviously, the father was very happy about that, but he was a very calm person. He just did not express emotions in this wide range. Okay. He experienced all the emotions, but he was very tempered in his expression. So he gave the young man permission to marry his daughter. And instead of getting really excited and shaking the man's hand and slapping him on the back and saying congratulations or very happy, welcome to the family, the father just simply smiled and said, "That's very nice. Yes, I support you. Very good." And then he got up and went and got his photo album and began to show the young man pictures of when he got married. So some people will look at that and say, "Man, is he really excited about his daughter getting married?" And the answer is yes, for him it was. But this is how he expressed his excitement. He was a very calm and very even-tempered individual. Now, how does this trait, neuroticism, impact the job? Well, employees that are highly neurotic, they tend to be the most unpleasant workers, right? They tend to be difficult to work with. They're very unpredictable. Their work is inconsistent. And typically, honestly, employers try to avoid them. Managers have a difficult time managing them because you just don't know what to expect. Okay, so person who's low in neuroticism, then they're fine. That's not a problem, right? They're very easy to manage, very easygoing. But a highly neurotic person can be a very challenging person in the workplace. Let's talk about openness to new experience. So this refers to a person's willingness to embrace the unknown, their imagination, right? How much time do you spend imagining things, right? And I know for me personally, I spend a great deal of time imagining the future, thinking about what it's going to be like, or if I did this, what would happen? If I did that, what would happen? And I'm constantly imagining and reimagining the future. These people who are high on openness to new experience, they tend to embrace their feelings and they embrace their actions. They're willing to try new things. They're not afraid of the unknown. So you have the opposite, which are people that are kind of closed to new experiences. They don't like the unknown. They like predictability. They like consistency. They're very practical. They prefer routine. So if you break their routine, they tend to get upset or feel bothered or reduce their productivity because their routine is broken. Okay. Whereas a person who's open to new experiences, if their routine is broken, they look at that as something. Well, here's an opportunity to experience something new, and it's not necessarily a negative thing, but it's just an opportunity to experience something new. Now, this personality trait, I think, is very interesting, and I want to take just a little second to talk about how, an article that I read, in how this particular article, this author, I think he's an academic person, but he wrote up just an article, and he was talking about kind of the political divide in America. And he was saying that we could use the Big Five personality trait, specifically openness to new experience, to explain the diversity of people. Sorry, the diversity of the big divide of political opinions in America. So on one side, you have conservatives. On the other side, you have liberals. Okay. So the liberals is their slogan under Obama. And I'm not saying Obama was a liberal, but he certainly was closer to being a liberal than he was a conservative. Okay. So, and I'm not saying Democrat and Republican, although you can kind of guess where they are, but liberals may be a little bit more extreme in their openness to new experiences than even your standard Democrat. Okay. And then Republicans, a conservative, may be even more conservative or closed to new experiences than your average Republican. So I'm not going to say Republican Democrat, although you can make those ties yourself. I'm going to say conservative and liberal. So a liberal person is not afraid to embrace changes. They're not afraid of the future in the sense that, hey, the economics of the country are changing. Jobs are going overseas. The country itself demographically is becoming more diverse. And by 2050, there may be more people of color in the United States than there are people that are white. People who are open to new experiences, they don't fear those things. In fact, they want to embrace those changes. And they want to create new systems around this ever-changing sense of reality. Okay. And they look at that as a sense of opportunity, as a sense of excitement for the future. We have hope for the future. Now, the conservatives, they're more so closed to new experiences, meaning that they like practicality, they like routine. And they say, look, if it's not broken, don't fix it. If this was working for us back in the 1950s and 1920s, then why are we changing and deviating from that? My dad would have this kind of job and he took care of his family. My granddad had a factory job and he took care of his family. My great granddad had a factory job and took care of his family. I should be able to have a factory job and take care of my family. But the world is changing and that factory now closed and the jobs went overseas to Singapore. So now that person doesn't have that factory job they can rely on. That sense of history, that sense of routine that was established that he saw growing up, that's been ripped away from him. And that's difficult for him to embrace. He doesn't like that sense of change. Well, I may have to learn a new skill set. I may have to learn about green energy so that I can then get a job maybe producing solar panels or whatever. That sense of change is something that's not embedded in the personality for a person who's low on openness to new experiences. So you see conservatives take the slogan of make America great again. And this points to the fact that we want to go back to the past. We want to stay back there and do the things that we thought made us successful back then. We don't want all this change. And frequently, what you would hear conservatives say is, we know that change is a part of life. We're not dumb people. We understand that. However, we need to take the change in a slow and measured manner, a slow and measured way. Okay, a way that we can continue to make the change practical, that it can fit our needs, and we're not deviating too far, too fast from what we know or believe to have worked in the past. Okay, so now you can see this political divide, and you can see it in the context of openness to new experiences. Now, this is an interesting thing, and I'm just throwing this in for free. Okay, while African Americans we have all the 5 same personality traits. We have people who are open and closed to new experiences. But why is it that African Americans tend to sit on one side of the equation? Okay, and here's the reason why. When you look at the past, the history of America, and those who want to kind of stay and repeat the past or keep that sense of practicality, they want slow change. Well, that change typically did not work in the favor of African Americans or other minorities. Back then, looking backward, make America great again, it looks like something, go back to when you had fewer rights, go back to when you were punished more for being the race and ethnicity that you are. Okay, so you tend to see them, irregardless of openness to new experience personality, to always be on that side of progressiveness because they want change, because to them the past really wasn't all that great. And what's interesting about this, and you can go and check it out for yourself, is during the 1965, when the civil rights movement was taking place, 1960, 1965. 1965 is when the Civil Rights Bill was signed into law by Lyndon B. Johnson. What you heard a lot of people in America say, okay, the conservatives, they were saying, look, we understand that we need to do something about fair treatment of people, but you just can't move too fast. You got to take your time with it. We have to do incremental changes. To which Martin Luther King answered, the time is now. The time for justice is always now. We don't say, let's have justice in 5 years. It never manifests. If we take justice and fair treatment and civil rights in an incremental, slow process, you never get to the stage where justice is. So justice demands that justice has to be done now. And that forces people that are conservative to come face to face with a new and unpredictable experience, you see? And that just doesn't fit their particular personality. So you have this divergence. And it's really interesting. And as you're going through and listening to people making their political arguments or rhetoric, I want you to think about this particular personality trait and see if you can see how it fits in and how that it can explain how some people act and some people don't. Now, when it comes to the job, openness to new experience, these are the individuals that make the best managers because they're willing to listen to their employees. They're willing to try new things. They're willing to engage in activities that their employees may suggest. Well, if we try it this way, will we have a bit better of a response? And the manager says, well, you know what? Let's try it. Let's see if it works. This person tends to be the best manager because inevitably, nothing you do, no plan is going to work out perfectly. And as you run into challenges, you're able to adjust to them. So that's openness to new experiences. Let's talk about the extroversion, okay? This is the last of our big 5 personality traits. So extroversion refers to how the tendency of a person to be social, to engage in outgoing activities and behaviors, to express themselves, to express their emotions, to express their feelings and thoughts. They're extroverts. So a person who's high on extroversion, they tend to be outgoing, they seek adventure, they tend to like to be the center of the party. Oftentimes, I used to plan some get-togethers. I'm like, look, we need to have somebody out here who's going to get the party started. And I have 2 or 3 friends that are extroverts. So I always made sure I invited them because they'll be the ones, walking around talking to everybody. They'll be the first one to get on the dance floor, or they're the ones that, throws out a crazy idea. Hey, let's play charades. Let's do this. They're the life of the party. So you can't have a party with a bunch of introverts. That's not going to be a very exciting party. Okay. So you need to throw some extroverts in there to kind of get things shaken up. The opposite of extroversion is called introversion. Okay. I know I don't have explicitly written on this slide, but we also know what an introvert is. An introvert is a person that's quiet, that's withdrawn, that's reserved. They actually, and this is interesting, an introvert, gets recharged. They feel more energetic, more energized, more ready to go by spending time to themselves, by withdrawing from people and really having that moment, that time of solace to themselves. They like their own company. Okay. Whereas an extrovert is the opposite. An extrovert, they get their sense of energy by being out and interacting with other people, by having something going on. So, oh, I need to relax. An extrovert says, let's go to the club. So, because they just want to relax. They want to get away from everything. While an introvert says, I want to relax. I want to go home. I'll put on a movie and maybe I'll just have one of my best friends over and we'll have some good conversation. That would be an example of an introvert. Okay, so what does this mean on the job? Well, an extrovert, they're friendly. They have a lot of friends. It's not the same as a person who's high on agreeableness, right? But the extrovert has a lot of friends because they're constantly on the move, interacting with people, reaching out to folks. They're the life of the party. They tend to make really great marketing and salespeople. Okay, they tend to make very poor accountants and lawyers. So we're just talking about personality traits. Of course, you could be an extrovert and a lawyer, but in general, lawyers are more introverts, accountants are more introverts, marketing and salespeople are more extroverts. Those personalities tend to enjoy the most success when their careers are aligned with their personality. All right, so that's the big 5 personality model. We're going to jump to our next personality model, which is the DISC model. And this is one of my favorite personality models. It stands for DISC, D-I-S-C, okay? The D stands for dominant. The I stands for influential. The C stands for compliant or conscientious. And the S stands for steady. And you put them all together and you have DISC, D-I-S-C. So we're going to break this model down. So much like the Big 5 model, the DISC model contends that everybody's personality is unique, that we all have attributes that are dominant, that are influential, that are compliant, and that are steady. We all have those 4 personality traits. However, one of these traits is going to be our strongest trait, okay? And then the reason why the DISC model and the personality model are similar in the sense that they're gradient. There's an infinite number of personalities because you could be high, low, medium, anywhere in between on any of these personality traits. And any slight differences, like maybe you're a high compliant on compliance, and I'm mid-level or medium on compliance. So that, but all of our other traits are very similar. We're still going to have different personalities. So this model lends itself to an infinite number of personality traits as well. So it's important also to note, just like in the personality, the Big 5 model, that no particular style, no personality profile is better than another person's. Okay, they're all just different, and we all have components of all of these attributes. So we need to get away from the idea that one personality type is better than another. They may be better in certain situations in terms of navigating to success, but in other situations, that personality trait may be more of a liability. Okay, so the DISC model, it simply helps us find out which style we tend to gravitate toward most, which style is our natural dispensation. Okay, and with that knowledge, we can understand our underlying tendencies and preferences, and we can look at how we can adapt our behavior to interact with other people. Now, I first took this model when I was in undergrad, and I was surprised when I took this test how accurately it portrayed my personality. And that personality profile from way back then is still valid even today. It also gave me tips on how to interact with people who were a different personality combinations. It helped me to understand how I would typically behave in certain situations, but also how others would behave and how that would make me feel and how I should engage them in order to have a successful interaction. And we're going to cover some of that in this lecture. So let's start with just understanding the overall model. All right. So you can see on this page here we have 4 quadrants: the dominant quadrant, influential, steady quadrant, and compliant quadrant. What's important to note is this axis here. Okay, this line that goes horizontally. And on this side, so I'm looking at the screen here, it should be the left-hand side where task focus is. That's where people who fall on this side of the continuum, they're more focused on the task, getting the job done, right? They are not as much focused on people's feelings. So the more extreme you are in being task focused or task oriented, the higher you're going to tend to be on this particular dimension. Okay, right here in the middle, think of this as like 0.0, or a person that's balanced. They're completely balanced. So nobody's going to be completely balanced on all 4 personality traits. We're all going to be on some extent, to the left or to the right, up or down on these attributes. So a person that is very task focused, they're going to be residing out here. And this means, think about this, if you've ever been on a team or in a job and somebody says, look, we just got to get the job done. I understand that's how you feel, but feelings are not going to get the job done. We have to get the work done. And this is what I propose. And everything they say is done for the purpose of finishing the job and finishing the job successfully. Whereas somebody else may be saying, look, we need to focus on people. We need to focus on the relationship side of things, because what point is it in getting the job done if everybody hates each other? So we need to be focused, and probably continue out to the right. We have more of a people focus. And this, by people focus, we're talking about relationships, interactions with other people, valuing their feelings and their opinions and things like that. Okay, a person that's extremely task focused, they may be considered to be kind of rude or blunt, right? Because they just say what needs to be said and they're not worried about how people feel about it. Their priority is getting the job done. Now, this axis, when we go, up and down, north and south, you have at the top, we have active. These are people that are very fast-paced. That's another way you can describe this as being fast-paced. They're very active. They're moving. They're always on the move. They're always going. They're moving and shaking. They're making things happen. They do not believe in just sitting still. It's not going to get done by itself. We got to get. They're action-oriented. We got to get going. Now, a person who's at the bottom of this, they're more reflective. So this is what I call slow-paced. They want to take time to think about what should be done before acting. We need to think before act. When we do it, we need to make sure we're doing it right. So we need to take our time with it. The active person says, no, we got to get it done. Let's get it done now. If we make a mistake, we'll figure it out and we'll adjust to it. The reflective person says, no, let's not make mistakes. Let's think it out thoroughly. Let's take our time and go about it in a very measured way. Okay, so now you can kind of see how these dimensions are going to play out. A dominant person, and we're talking about the extremes. Obviously, there's an infinite number of positions on this chart, but a dominant person would be someone who's task focused and active. They're focused on getting the job done and they're willing to take action now. Dominant. Okay, some of their attributes or descriptors about them: they're direct, they're decisive, they're a doer. That makes sense, right? They're task focused and they're active. They know what the vision is. Matter of fact, they set the vision and they're ready to go. Team, let's go. We're moving out. So they come off as more domineering and demanding. Okay, they're fast-paced. On the other side of that is you have someone who's very fast-paced, they're very active, but they're very people-focused. So instantly, what should probably come to your mind here is an extrovert, someone who is very fast-paced, always on the move. They want to get things done. They're moving out, but they're not focused on the job. They're focused on people and relationships. So this is going to be, your person is influential, and you can see right now that there would be some conflict between the dominant and the influential personality types. Because the dominant is like, let's get going, let's move, so we can get the job done. Whereas the influential person is like, let's get going, let's move, and let's talk about how everybody feels. Let's make sure everybody is happy. Let's, they want to inspire people. And the dominant person says, look, there's time for inspiration and then there's time for work. So we need to get to work. Whereas the influential person is steady, trying to motivate people. They're interacting with people. They're finding different situations and things interesting. So they're impulsive and they don't tend to be very organized. That's one thing about both of these two personality traits is that neither one, the influential or the dominant, is highly organized. Of the two, the dominant is more organized. The influential is the lesser organized. Okay, but these are people that are more focused on acting and getting things going. We look at now the steady people. Now this is what's interesting. These are people who are people focused but reflective. All right, they're very steady, very consistent. They they're supportive, they're sincere. Relationships are very important to them, and they're not very fast paced. Okay, so what these people like, what's most important to these individuals is routine. So you should write that down. People that fall in the steady category, they're reflective, like they think about things, and they're very people oriented. They're focused on routine. Now, these are the ones, think about a secretary, for example. So the boss may be this fast-paced, dominating guy, and the secretary is more slow-paced. She's very people, oriented, but she's incredibly supportive and sincere, okay, and steady. So she has her routines, and those routines work for her day in and day out. Once she understands the style of her boss or his boss, the person who's steady, the secretary in this case, this example, sets up routines around that person's dominating this. So that person can be very fast paced. It's just that the steady person is going to set up a routine which empowers them to deal with that fast paced nature. And as long as they have their routine, they can be successful. So what's important to note here is that the S is what I like to refer to as the work portion of the group. This is the person that does probably 70% of the work on the team. They're very reliable. They're very supportive. They don't mind working. What they don't like, or their weaknesses in a sense, would be instability and frequent change. That's what they don't like. So here you can see there being conflict between the steady and the influential personality traits, because the influential is very action oriented, but they're very impulsive. They're very unpredictable. And that sense of impulsiveness can cause strain or frustration to a person who's steady. One, the influential is trying to move really fast, and the steady person is slow. But they can deal with that as long as they can have a routine in place. But when you add fast pace with an impulsive nature, it becomes very difficult for a person with a steady personality to keep up with that. Now, the dominating person, they're not impulsive. So it makes it easier for the steady person to develop routines to support a dominant personality. In fact, of all the personality traits, the dominant and the steady personality trait work together the best. It just requires that they have mutual respect for one another. So the dominant person does not begin to take on impulsive behaviors, because that destroys the routines that give the steady person their sense of stability. Okay, so let's talk about the last one here. A person is very task oriented and also reflective. They're very slow, but they're focused on the job. They're not worried about how people feel. They're worried about getting the job done. Now, this person here is highly conscientious. Watch this. They're conscientious. They're careful. They're calculating, right? And because of that, they can also come off as being very condescending. What type of person does this sound like? What type of career is calculating, is slower paced, is very careful? Well, careers like accounting, careers like being a lawyer, right? Careers like human resources, okay? Or you're going to be the lawyer within human resources, right? So not all of human resources. Some parts lend themselves very well to this personality trait. Now, this individual here, this C, right, compliant or conscientious, I refer to them a lot as being kind of conscientious or whatever, but they hate to get things wrong. This is kind of like their biggest downfall, their biggest weakness, is that they hate to be wrong. So they'll take their time, they will think things through, and they will know the rules. So rules are very important to a person, because they're going to get the job done, but they're going to take their time to do it, and they're going to make sure it's done right. That's why they're being reflective. That's why they're willing to take their time to do it right. They're very careful, and they don't want to violate any of the rules. So let's talk about this in relation to the other personalities. So we can see that the compliant and the steady will get along very well. The problem here is that the job is going to take forever to get done because they're too slow together. You need somebody there pushing them ahead, pushing them out of their comfort zones. But how does the compliant work with the dominant? The compliant works almost like a set of brakes for the dominant personality. And the same thing for the influential personality. The C, they act like a pair of brakes. So the dominant, is wanting to run off and just take over the world. And the C is saying, wait, got to be careful. Here's what the law says. You can't do that because the law says this, or the rules state that. Or if you're in a group with a group on campus, then the professor said that these are the rules that we have to follow for this particular project. That's a person who's probably more so the compliant personality trait. And they are super important to have on the team because they'll keep you from getting in trouble. They'll keep you from getting things wrong. The dominant person may take off and the influencer may take off and start working on things and get them wrong, make mistakes. The dominant will just power their way through it and the influencer will just talk their way around it, okay? But the compliant person prevents you from making those mistakes in the first place. So a strong team actually has all 4 personality traits. All right, so what's the purpose of this model? It really is about understanding yourself better, so self-knowledge, and also communication. Being able to ascertain what personality trait are you the most dominant in, okay? And how that relates to other personality traits. So you can figure out how you can communicate with them. You can improve performance as a leader. You can improve effectiveness, okay? They provide a common way for everybody to be able to express their personalities. So now that all of us understand this model at a high level, we can now discuss what our personalities are in relation to this model, okay? And we can provide examples of situations when our personality have sparked certain outcomes. So really quick, I'm just going to do this quickly. The next couple slides, they talk about all the personality traits. I know I did that a lot in the slide before last, but we're just going to go over the formal definitions of these traits. So D stands for dominance. This is a person that's focused primarily on results. They tend to see the big picture. This is the natural born leader of the group. If you ever find yourself in groups and you're kind of, somebody's always naturally picked to be the spokesperson, they're naturally picked to be the leader, it's probably because they're high on dominance, okay? They naturally find themselves in that position. They tend to be blunt, they tend to be outspoken, and they tend to be demanding. Those are attributes of them, and those attributes help them when it comes to being a leader. The influencing, the I. So this person, their focus primarily is on influencing people. They like to talk and persuade people to get on with them. So the dominant and the I are the 2 personalities that have the most conflict. But if they can learn to work together, they can be a very powerful team because the dominant person would have the strategy and the I is the person that would persuade other people to follow the dominant person's strategy, okay? So if they can work together, they can be a very powerful team. However, when we look at conflict, the D and the I have the greatest amounts of conflict, okay? When we look at the personality traits that get along the best, the D and the C get along the best, okay? And we're going to talk about what happens when each personality trait is under extreme pressure. That's also very interesting, okay? The I tends to be very enthusiastic, high energy, trusting, open. They're open to new experiences, and they just want to get out there and get involved, okay? The S, this is a person who's very steady. They are the highest on being dependable. They tend to stay calm. They care about the feelings of other people. They tend to be slower paced, and they don't like to be rushed. Now, as I say, if they're working in a fast-paced environment, that's fine because they're just going to develop routines that allow them to be successful in that fast-paced environment. And the C, this so conscientious. So you can see here, the C can stand for compliant or conscientious. Please be aware of that if you're taking an exam question or quiz question. All right, this person is focused on quality and accuracy. They're focused on wanting to do the right thing, okay? And they don't want to be wrong. They enjoy their independence. They oftentimes can be kind of demanding, but that's only because they want to make sure things are done the right way, okay? Now, each of these 4 personality traits, I'm gonna go back up to the model, the picture up here. I want to share one other thing with you guys, 2 other things with you. One, the dominant person. Their greatest weakness, their greatest concern, their greatest threat, if you will, is, I think like the loss of control. Okay, they want to be in control. So when they're out of control, they're, they don't. That's a problem for them, right? So they don't like that. The C, the compliant person, their greatest concern, their greatest worry is being wrong. They hate to be wrong. So they're willing to take as much time as it takes to make sure that they're being right in whatever it is that they're doing, saying, or proposing. So that's why they study the rules a lot. That's why they make really great lawyers, really great accountants. Okay. And the S, this person's greatest weakness or greatest threat is the breakup of their routine. Someone that's constantly introducing change, and that change is happening at a rapid pace. Okay. So you could, in a sense, say this person, if you're going to kind of tie it into the big five, they're more low on openness to new experiences because they don't like change. They want to be able to have a routine that works in predictability. The I, the influential person, their biggest weakness or drawback basically for them is that they like to be in control, but they don't want the responsibility of being in control. They want to influence people, but they don't want to be responsible for the outcomes. So the I sees himself more as the neck. So they're okay with the D being the head. Oh, the D is the head as long as I'm the neck. So I turn the head left and right. I kind of direct the head, but the final responsibility and authority don't really fall on me. I could just influence the situation, influence the outcome. All right, so now you know each of the four personality traits. You also know their big weaknesses. Let's talk about one other thing before we wrap up this lecture, and that is what happens to these personality traits when they fall under great stress, when they're under such extreme pressure. And I want you to think about this is that maybe you're on a team or you're being a leader, and boy, you just have so much adversity coming against you, and it feels like you just cannot be successful. Everywhere you turn, someone or something is fighting against you. So, what happens when a dominant person is under extreme, immense pressure? Well, their behavior flips from being dominant to being an S. And I want you to think about this. Have you ever been in a group where you know this person, the naturally dominant person, is trying to get the group to follow what he's saying or what she's saying? Eventually, they get so frustrated, they say, you know what, forget it. I don't care anymore. Whatever you want to do, just do whatever you want to do. Matter of fact, you tell me what you want me to do, and I'll just do it. Okay? You just tell me what you want, and I'll do it. I'm tired of I'm tired of fighting with you guys. So they throw their hands up in the air, and they just become more of an S. Has anybody ever seen that happen?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, and for some of you, that may very well be you, right? So
Yeah.
now let's talk about what happens to an I when an I gets under extreme pressure. Okay, so the I, they want to influence, but nobody's listening to them. They're not able to persuade people. They're running under adverse. The dominant person is just hitting them on the head all the time, and they're so frustrated. So what happens to them? Believe it or not, they flip as well, and they become a C. You know what? Forget it then. You know what? I'm not going to. You know what? All I got to say is this: you got to follow the rules. You got to follow the rules, and the rules say this. The professor says this. So they go to a default. The only way to influence is then by just sticking very close and very tightly, very legitimately following the rules. That's it. Okay. So it's really interesting to see that flip take place as well. Okay. Now, here's another one you'll probably find very interesting. What happens when the steady person it comes under pressure? They're under extreme pressure. So maybe the dominant person is changing too much, or maybe the leader is actually an I, and there's so much impulsive behavior going on, and the steady person doesn't know what to do. They just can't take it anymore. I've had all I could take. I can't take it no more. I'm sick of this. You guys can't make your mind up. I'm just so frustrated. Listen here. I'll tell you what. Here's what y'all all gonna do. You're gonna do this. You're gonna do this, and you're gonna do this. Are we okay? And I don't want to hear nothing from anybody else. What just happened? The S person just flipped to be a dominant. When the S personality falls under such extreme pressure, their need for stability, their need for routine is so important that they then will try to force and impose that routine on the overall group. And very frequently, because this person is most likely the person that's the most quiet in the group, they're the one that just wants to kind of work and have everybody be happy. When this person speaks up out of frustration and anger, everybody else in the group tends to shut up and listen. as now the quiet person begins barking orders at everybody about getting it together, working together, and what we're going to do to get the job done. So it's very interesting. If you look closely, you've probably seen that happen too. Now, what happens to the compliant person when they're under extreme pressure and stress? Well, they don't flip to an I, if that's what you were thinking. Instead, they dig deeper into what they know works. No matter what, they don't want to be wrong. So they go even deeper into the rules, into the regulations. Okay, they become even more calculating, even more focused on getting the job done and getting it right. So they become even more conscientious, is what they become. So this is the DISC model, and there's a tremendous amount to learn about it. So hopefully, by understanding these personality traits, you can see yourself somewhere in there. You can see other people, and you now have a framework to understand the interactions, whether they were successful or unsuccessful with other people. And you can use this information to help influence or lead other people if you're tasked with being the leader in the group. So that wraps up our lecture on personalities. If you have any questions, now is the time when you could ask those, or now's the time where you can ask them.